What's going on, guys? My name's Joe. You can find me everywhere online at TattooedTheist. Today we're going to be very briefly talking about a satanic display in Iowa and how it's causing a little bit of a stir. So we'll get right into it. Real quick, if you're not a member of our Discord group, it is free. It will always be free. There's a link in the description below. Just click that, join, you're good to go. Everything from conspiracy theories to theology, the Bible, science. We give reading suggestions of things that we like to read. There are tons of smart people in the group, way smarter than me. It's a great place to be. If you're into Christianity, world religions, theology, and biblical studies. Great place to be. So if you're not a member of the group, come and join. But this is what we're looking at. So satanic display in Iowa State Capitol stirs debate among GOP lawmakers, outrage and disgust. Look at that beautiful thing. Beautiful. A satanic exhibit in the Iowa State Capitol has caused a stir among Republican state lawmakers who are debating the legality of allowing such displays on state property. Interesting that legality is being brought up in this. Let's continue. A satanic exhibit in the Iowa State Capitol has caused a stir among Republican state lawmakers who are debating, they're just repeating it right there, an organization describing itself as the Satanic Temple of Iowa erected an altar depicting a silver ram's head on a mannequin adorned with a red cape and surrounded by candles and flowers, according to local KKCI Des Moines. The statue also holds a red wreath with an inverted pentagram. Iowa State Rep. John Dunwell, a Republican and Christian pastor, checks all the boxes, who also serves as assistant majority leader, told the Christian Post that while he disagrees personally with what the display represents, he doesn't believe government should be getting involved. Here's the thing though, government does get involved. They do. There have been many instances over just the past 3 years where government has forced their involvement into the religious practices in this country, and they had no problem with that. We saw satanic flags going up outside of city buildings. We've seen a lot of things similar to this, and this is the answer we always get when it's something non-Christian happening in a public square. On the flip side, though, they have no issue of bringing government into church when it serves them, or when it gives them a foothold or gives them some degree of control over a situation. So moving on. For me, quote, he is saying, I would rather have an evil, blasphemous display or no display at all than have the state dictate what they think is appropriate. I'm going to read that again. This is a pastor. This is a Republican. This is John Dunwell. He said, for me, I would rather have an evil, blasphemous display or no display at all, rather than have the state dictate what they think is appropriate. That does not cross topics. I think we could all agree. So it's interesting for a Christian to take that stance. There are a lot better ways to basically say the same thing without saying that you would rather have an evil, blasphemous display than have the government dictate what they think is appropriate. It's a wild way to say what he was trying to say, a very wild way. Dunwell's comments to CP Christian Post echoed a thread he wrote on X explaining his position on the satanic display. This thread garnered millions of views on the platform over the weekend and prompted criticism from some who suggested he was not opposing it forcefully enough. So this is the tweet from Mr. Rep. John Dunwell. As many of you have become aware, last week a display was erected. I'm a child. Was erected at the Iowa Capitol by the Satanic Temple of Iowa. As I have responded to concerns from Iowans about the display, I wanted to share with you how the display came to be and my response. How did it happen? As many of you have become aware, last week a display was erected at the Iowa Capitol by the Satanic Temple of Iowa. As I have responded to concerns from Iowans about the display, I wanted to share with you the display came to be in my response. How did it happen? The Capitol structure falls underneath the control of the Iowa legislature. The Department of Administrative Services, DAS, is charged with the management, Currently, access for displays at the Capitol are open to anyone through an application process. Though there are some guidelines, they do not discriminate on the basis of religion or ideology. Displays are permitted to be displayed for 2 weeks. So it's temporary. All displays are required to communicate that they are an independent display and not to be associated with the state of Iowa. Which makes sense. The Satanic Temple petitioned for the display in August and were approved with some modifications. They wanted to use an actual goat head, I'm assuming a skull, and were prohibited from doing so. The Iowa legislature can set the rules and standards for any display. The current operating principle has been to either allow all displays or none. The legislature has the power to change it if they deem necessary. My observations and responses as an Iowan, state representative, and a pastor, checking all the boxes, my observation as a follower of Christ, I certainly find a display from the Satanic Temple objectionable. It stands in direct opposition to my faith and would be classified as evil. Not a new experience for me or my family. The Word of God continually warns about the dangers in our world. In fairness, many other religions or non-religious people have the same perspective about Christianity. That is fair. And I like that he said that, because that's honest. It's self-aware. I respect that. My observation as an Iowan and a state representative, I don't want the state evaluating and making determinations about religion. I am guided by the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. My response as a follower of Christ. The display is an inanimate object that has no real power. In and of itself, we have nothing to fear. Wild, because the Bible has a very strict, objective view of idols. Idols throughout biblical history were in most cases inanimate objects that were used for worship of false gods. This would absolutely fit the model of all sorts of parts of the Bible that outwardly condemn this, being any part of it. Now, not to say he's being a part of it, so I'm not blaming him, but this concept of it's just an inanimate object. So was all of the pagan idolatry in the Old Testament, in the New Testament. It's no different. There is intention to worship a false deity, and there is some kind of item or object for you to do that through. It acts as kind of a vessel in pagan worship to use these inanimate objects. So not a good argument. Again, not blaming him, but not a good argument. Oppose the message of the display. It is not just another way to worship the same God. There are differences that need to be pointed out. The display glorifies the evil influence we oppose. True enough. The primary response required is prayer. Meh, not a fan. The display itself is an invitation of the work we have yet to do. Iowa needs Jesus. I wonder what the demographic statistics are for Christianity when opposed statistically to secular folk in Iowa. I would think that's pretty high. Not that that's related at all, but just curious. The display provides a teaching example for our families of the difference between the person and work of Christ and that of Satan. Maybe love, light, and sacrifice compared to dark, foreboding creature. That's not what Satan is. Satan is not a dark, foreboding creature. That's not what Satan is. So no, theologically, no, thumbs down. My faith is never imposed upon others, nor should it ever become a direct part of government. Interesting, because it was, like, for a long time. It is always a response to the person and work of Jesus Christ. I don't want to mix the kingdoms! ! Government is a poor arbiter of religion. That is true enough. Take full advantage of the opportunities to express our faith in appropriate displays and programs at the Capitol. My response as a state representative. Dang boy, this is long. Review the guidelines to ensure they represent our constitutional rights. Sure. Monitor the number of organizations requesting displays. I don't want the Capitol to be overwhelmed by displays. In the future, we may need to find ways to appropriately limit the number of displays. Don't see how that's related. Continue to dialogue with other elected officials and Iowans. Iowians? There's no I though. Iowans on this issue. Okay, so there's his post. Dunwell explained in the thread that Satanic Temple has applied for the display in August, and that the Iowa Legislators Department of Administrative Services, which governs the display, does not discriminate on the basis of religion or ideology. He also claimed that the original plan for the display to feature a goat skull was denied, which I suppose is a win, right? They still used it, though. They just didn't use a real one. That to me is kind of a weird line. I get it to a point, and then to a point I don't get it at all. I personally don't care if it's a real goat's skull or not. The reality is that most people who actually practice Luciferianism, which this would not be... Here's the funny thing. Satanism generally has nothing to do with Lucifer, has nothing to do with Satan. Like as depicted by mainstream Christianity. It has nothing to do with Satan. Satanism, generally, is the worship of self. It's the polar opposite of a theistic religion. It's a non-theistic religion. They worship self. That's what it is. Luciferianism is the actual religion that worships the prince of evil, right? Like that worships Lucifer. The what people think of when they think of Satan, they're normally thinking of Lucifer. They're thinking of a specific evil deity. Well, there is a religion, Luciferianism. They worship Lucifer, a specific evil deity. All that to say, it was a satanic group that put this in there. And this is where there needs to be a line drawn, because Satanists don't actually believe any of that stuff. They're non-theistic. So it's all Satanism is making a mockery of Christianity. That is part of their purpose. If you actually look through some of their literature, it's a literal part of their purpose is to make a mockery of those who believe in God. So not only did they get their display up in the Capitol, it's a display of something they don't believe. It's just to make a public mockery of Christianity. Which, and I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, in a way, I support it. Not in this context, though. Not in this situation. In no way do I support this. But making a mockery of Christianity, to me personally, which is very different than what we're seeing here, is very different to Satanism. To me, making a mockery of Christianity is putting Christians on blast for in a positive, productive, loving way. It can be seen as making a mockery of Christianity. I've been told that I do that on our live streams and in my videos. That's not my intention. But if that's what you want to call it, then I support that. To me, that is called accountability. I'm putting people on blast, or putting Christianity in general on blast, as a form of accountability. I've been told I'm making a mockery of it. I don't agree. But I see that as a productive way of mocking a religion. It's actually holding them accountable. But if you want to call it mockery, I'm all for mockery. However, this is a group of people who just hate God. They just hate Christians, specifically, and a part of their actual creed as an organization is to make a mockery of those who believe in God, and to make a direct mockery of God himself. They don't actually believe in God, but they want to mock it anyways, which is always kind of funny to me. But they absolutely don't believe in the devil, in Satan, in Lucifer, whatever word you want to use. You know what I'm talking about, though. A very specific evil deity. They don't believe it. It's a massive win for the disgusting, self-righteous, self-focused Satanism organization. It's a massive win. Dunwell pushed back against any accusation that his position is radical, telling Christian Post that he believes the government would not be a good arbiter of what is an appropriate religious expression and what is not appropriate religious expression. The problem is they do. They do when it's against Christianity, when it's against Catholics. We had a big thing with Catholics over the past couple of years being targeted by the government. But when it has to do with Satanists who aren't actually a religion, they don't actually believe in any deity, That's Luciferianism. So when the government then allows Satanists, which is just an organization of people who hate the concept of God and specifically hate Christian people, them allowing the Satanists, who are not a religious group, to do something like this and put it under religious freedom is a lie. If this was a Luciferian group who genuinely believes in both God and the devil and choose to worship the devil, then I get the argument and I support it. In that, religious freedom is religious freedom. It's not just for your religion. It needs to be for all of them, regardless of how much you hate it. It needs to be. But religious freedom should not extend to Satanism, because they are not a religion. They just call themselves a religion. And over the past 5-7 years, they've been able to wiggle their way into being classified and protected under the guise of being a religion. It will down the line become very problematic. Dunwell describes himself as a Bible-believing, crazy evangelical Christian, but said that while he brings his faith and everything else about him to his role as legislator, he doesn't believe it's his job to impose his faith on anyone else. No, it is not. It is your job to help facilitate imposing law, though, and making sure that constitutional rights are given to those that constitutionally deserve them, and not including organizations that are not religious in nature, in belief, and intention, not including them under those rights, because they shouldn't be. Luciferianism, sure. Don't agree with it, but sure. Satanism, no. It is not a religion. I have the freedom, he said, to express my faith and freedom to talk about it. He said, it influences my decisions, but it is not something that I say, you have to have my faith and only my faith can be expressed. No, because again, that is not the problem. While Dunwell said he believes a day is coming when every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, he also said that day is in the future. And that Christians are not called to establish his kingdom politically in the meantime. No, but they are called to establish his kingdom on earth. Pretty sure there like might be like a Bible verse about that that's on a whole bunch of canvases in a bunch of suburban households. I am nervous about government interfering with religious expression. It's not a religion. Even religious expression I may disagree with, it's not a religion. He also said, adding that many of his Christian friends and constituents agree with him that there is nothing to fear about that satanic altar, which he dismissed as an inanimate object. Somebody needs to read him a Bible bedtime story. Though this is uncomfortable, and though this may be what even some would call blasphemous towards our faith, it's absolutely blasphemous. It's a group of people who just hate Christians and literally have adopted these occultist images and symbols and idols literally to just make a mockery of the Christian faith. It's ridiculous. The reality is God is bigger than this, he said, and we have the ability to stand against this spiritually, and we have the ability to express our ideas about it, but we don't need to live in fear of it or get all angry and behave in an unchristian way because someone does something we disagree with. Dunwell's fellow state rep, Brad Sherman, who is also a Republican and a pastor, took a different view on the topic, arguing in a newsletter last week that there is a potentially legal recourse by which satanic displays could be prohibited on state-owned property. The outrage and disgust for this satanic display is widespread, but few people think there is much that can be legally done about it because of free speech and freedom of religion. Sherman wrote, however, I disagree. Let's see where this goes. Citing the preamble to the 1857 Iowa State Constitution, which established the state on the basis of a belief in a supreme being and dependence on him, capital H for him, for a continuation of those blessings. Sherman described any legal interpretation that would afford Satan and God the same religious expression is twisted and tortured. Such a legal view not only violates the very foundation of our state constitution, but it offends the God upon whom we depend and undermines our well-being, Sherman argued. He also said that civil magistrates are not exempt from obedience to God. Interesting. And that they must submit to him in government as much as any other area of life. So this is the polar opposite end of the spectrum. No government involvement, absolute government involvement. Very interesting. Either he is God or he is not. No. Just because your state allows religious freedom outside of the specific Christian faith does not make God God or not God God. Does not make God God, and also does not make God God. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Either way, it says nothing about God. God is what God is, or God is not what God is not. People being allowed to put satanic, as stupid as it is, and as much as it is not a religion, them being able to put a display up in the Capitol says nothing about who God is. And this is the problem when you go to the other end of the spectrum. You lose rationale on either end. You lose logical thinking on either end, which is why you need to learn how to be in the middle, in my humble opinion. Not in the middle with your beliefs, in the middle with your ability to see both sides, and with your ability to think cognitively and intellectually about a topic and not emotionally. Both of these men are involved in this topic emotionally. It's not coming truly from their faith. It's not coming from intellect or rationale or reason. It's coming from emotions. It's very obvious and very clear to see. Claiming that it violates the Iowa state constitution, Sherman called on Republican Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds to remove the blasphemous display. He also called for an adoption of clarifying legislation that would prohibit satanic displays on state property and allow the 10 Commandments. So you literally have the opposite ends of the spectrum here. So one guy views religious freedom above all else. I'm sorry. Yeah, views religious freedom above all else, but wants no government involvement whatsoever. The issue with that guy is that, well, now you're allowing a non-religious organization to function under religious protections. On the other end, you have a guy who wants to remove religious freedom and instead religiously impose his personal religion. Very interesting. Christian Post has reached out to Sherman's office for comment. I don't think we need to go into the rest of this. We'll finish it up. Andrew T. Walker, who serves as Associate Professor at Christian Ethics at the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, echoed Sherman's sentiments in an op-ed for World Magazine, arguing that there are potential limits to constitutional freedom and that there is neither a theological or political basis for allowing satanic displays on government property. If it's because it's not a religion, then yes. But if they are going about this with the perspective that Satanism is a religion, then you do have to allow them religious freedom. You do. You can't pick and choose which religions are allowed religious freedom. It either applies to all religions or none. The loophole here, in all truth, loophole, is that it is not a religion. Constitutional analysis is determined through legal tests of adjudication, and no right is absolute, Walker wrote, noting how even English philosopher John Locke, whose theories helped frame American political thought, argued that atheism was a threat to public order and should not be tolerated. I mean, that's relatively true, but you're allowed to be an atheist. To think that raising questions about the limits of constitutional rights is somehow scandalous and illegitimate and in itself is to misunderstand constitutionalism, Walker said. Constitutionalism is a social pact for agreed upon cooperation, for good or for ill, depending on the question at hand. Every constitutional order is guided by some explicit or implicit limiting principle. Walker argued that limits could potentially be placed on satanic displays on government property based on questions such as whether Satanism meets the definition of a traditionally understood religion. Thank you, God. Whether a reasonable person would see it as a civic and moral good, or whether a reasonable observer would view satanic displays as serving to advance a prudent purpose. Satanism, whether real or pretend, is an outright celebration of evil, darkness, and perversity. Walker wrote, so in my view, there should be no satanic displays in government buildings. Yes, even a Baptist can say such things. Satanic Temple co-founder Lucien Greaves told the Des Moines Register that the display is not intended to dig at Christians. Ha! And that the government should not be dictating what religious displays are permissible. Then what is it for? I would love to have him explain that to me. What is it for? You don't believe in Satan. You don't believe in Lucifer. You do not believe in the devil. So no matter what you want to call him, you don't believe in him. You also don't believe in God. In fact, you don't believe in anything. You believe in self. You believe in living the most pleasurable life for oneself, making choices for oneself, doing what is best for oneself. So not only is it not a religion, it's an atheistic organization, it also is only and solely self-serving, therefore not good for society. I'm not down with pushing religious freedom to the wayside because it's not generally good for society, but I am good pushing religious freedom to the wayside if you are not a religion. And if you are literally an organization of people who are just trying to cause harm, whether it is to Christians specifically or to society at large. Continuing, people assume that we're there to insult Christians, and we're not, Greaves told the outlet. And I would hope that even people who disagree with the symbolism behind our values, whether they know what those values are or not, would at least appreciate that it's certainly a greater evil to allow government to pick and choose between forms of religious expression. Don't agree and then agree. Satanic mockeries of nativity scenes have made headlines in recent years in places such as neighboring Illinois, where I am, where in 2021, members of the state chapter of the Satanic Temple installed a statue of baby Baphomet, swaddled in a manger in the Illinois state capitol, Rotunda. Another year featured a snake-ativity? Oh, God. I'm going to be Googling that. Statue depicting a serpent coiling around Eve's hand to offer her the forbidden fruit. So again, to recap here, my good, beautiful friends, Satanism is not a religion. Satanism is an atheistic organization. People will argue some Satanists do believe, but in general, as an organization, they are not a theistic organization, meaning they do not believe there are deities. They do not believe there are gods. They do not believe Lucifer is a deity. They are a self-serving organization that, for the most part, just tries to stir shit up. For the most part. Again, never absolutes, but for the most part. There are other offshoots of, depending on who you talk to, of the overall occult scene that do believe in Satan, in Lucifer, in the devil, whatever you want to call it. They believe in a specific evil deity and they worship that deity. Satanists are not them. So Satanists should not fall under religious protections of the Constitution. They should not. They should not be allowed to put displays up. If Luciferians want to do it, that's a different conversation. That's a religion. For those who intentionally, honestly believe and worship, that's a religion. No, I don't think it's good for society. No, I don't think it's good for the individual. No, I don't think it's good for any sort of interpersonal relationships whatsoever. But if it's genuine, it's a religion. If those boxes are checked, they should be under religious protection, unless it becomes something that is actually, literally, tangibly, in a measurable way, causing issues for society at large. Then something needs to be discussed. And that would go for any religion. But until then, they should be under religious freedom. Satanists should not, because they do not believe in anything. They are non-theistic. I love you guys. I hope you found this interesting. I'm going to try to start doing more stuff like this. Join the Discord group if you are not in it. Remember, we do a Bible study every Sunday night at 6 p.m. Central Time. And we do a live podcast that you can call into every Thursday night at 6 p.m. Central Time. I love you guys.